camera just fell. Or my microphone just fell. Okay. Just switch over to all right. I'm not sure if anyone is here yet, but welcome to my live stream. I'm supposed to go live here. Okay, it's a bit on a delay, it looks like. It looks like I am live in Substack too. Wonderful. Okay. Now, so for anybody who's here, this is my first time live streaming, multi-streaming across platforms. I'm going to be going over the housing news of the day, but bear with me while I figure out how to live stream. Admire my lovely office, newly redecorated, while I'm trying to figure this out. So let me see if there's some place here where I can see who is talking to me. Never miss a comment. Click on a chat message, display it on screen. Okay. Let's see. How can I tell if anybody is actually watching? Oh, looks like at least on Instagram there are people watching. All right. Well, that's good enough for me. All right. I'm Daryl Fairweather. I'm Redfin's chief economist. I am also an author. I wrote Hate the Game. And welcome to my very first live stream, y'all. Thank you for being here. I'm going to be talking about news that I think is super interesting in housing and economics. And the first piece of news that I think is worth talking about is what exactly is happening with the Strait of Hormuz and how is that impacting the economy? How is it impacting inflation? How is it impacting mortgage rates and therefore impacting the housing market? Now, I'm assuming that all of you can hear me right now. I'm going to switch over to Instagram just to make sure. Okay. I don't know. Things look good. No one's left yet. So I'm going to assume things are going well with the live stream. I'm going to try to cut it on the meta commentary on the live stream, although it is very tempting to do. All right. So big news out of the Wall Street Journal, reported on in many other outlets, is that oil futures are rising because the Hormuz closure is dragging on. It's been a couple of months now since February 29th. Oh, I see a comment. Yes, from @living San Francisco. Nice. Okay. It has been a couple of months now. February 28th was when the war in Iran started, and that was when mortgage rates shot up as a result. The war is dragging on. The Strait of Hormuz remains shut. We all know that President Trump and some others went to China last week to try to, get some global goodwill for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not a global policy expert. I'm not an international relations person, but I do understand that it is impacting the economy, the fact that the Strait of Hormuz remains shut. And there was this narrative at the beginning of the war that this was going to be a short war. And I think that markets took that pretty literally, and they priced in a short closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But now that it's been, a couple of months now, it's obviously not that short of a war. And the longer that this goes on, the longer it seems like it's going to last. It's not reassuring that we are still basically in the same position that we were about a month ago. It makes it seem like how many more months of this is it going to go on? And even without anything necessarily changing in terms of the status of the war or the status of the Strait of Hormuz, every day that goes on, the markets start to feel like this could really last a long time. And the longer it lasts, the more likely it is that we get to this point where the global economy really starts to deteriorate because of the strait being closed, because of how high gas prices are. From what I understand from other economists, we're not in this doomsday scenario yet, but that point exists where the strait stays closed and the gas prices go to $10 a gallon, and that would just be very, very bad for not only the US economy, but for the global economy. So we're not there yet, but like the longer this goes on, the longer it seems like it could go on, and the higher the likelihood of there being a very bad outcome, that likelihood increases. So that is why mortgage rates are up. They went up Friday. Let me check exactly how much they went up. They are now at 6.65% for a 30-year fixed rate. And to put that into context, just let me look at what it is for the 1 year. This is flat from yesterday, but if I go into mortgage rates, why can't I find this? Here we go. Before the Strait of Hormuz closed, mortgage rates dipped to 5.99% on February 23rd. Oh, I misspoke about the day that the war started. It started the day after that, February 24th. The last time mortgage rates were as high as they are right now was in August of last year. And that's an important point. The last time mortgage rates were this high was August of last year, which means that in May of last year, mortgage rates were actually higher than they are right now. For those of you who are tuning in because you care about the housing market is actually looking better right now than it did last year. And that is because mortgage rates are lower than they were last year. They're much higher than they were in February before the war started, but mortgage rates are actually lower than they were last year, which is why we think pending sales are up. And also pending sales seem to be up even for some reason beyond mortgage rates. The housing market got off to a rough start earlier this year, back in January. There was a lot of bad weather. Maybe some of that demand was delayed, and now home buyers, now that the weather is better, are ready to buy, even in face of these somewhat high mortgage rates. They're high because of the war, lower than they were last year because that was when the trade war started. But it still is bad for the housing market. The mortgage rates are high because the higher mortgage rates go, the less affordable it is to borrow to buy a home. And that just means that there are people out there who are getting priced out because of high mortgage rates. But actually, if you look at mortgage payments on the median priced home, they're lower now than they were this time last year, like a couple of percentage points. Okay, so that's what's going on with oil and how it's impacting interest rates. Obviously, oil being expensive is bad for the economy. It's bad for everyday people who fill up their gas tanks and have less money left over once they do that. It's bad because it makes it more expensive to ship any type of good because you need to put that in a truck or put that in a cargo ship, and it's more expensive to get things places that they need to go. So that drives up the price of just about everything. We got inflation data last week that was bad. Producer prices up 6% annually. Consumer prices up, I think, like 3.5%. Is that what it was? PCE, core prices, I forget what it was. Anyway, inflation is getting worse. And that just means that people are getting poorer because everything costs more. It also means that the Fed cannot cut interest rates. So this brings me to the next big news of the moment. Kevin Warsh is going to be our new Fed chair. And he, I'm sure, would very much like to lower interest rates. That's what President Trump wants him to do. But because inflation remains a problem, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, as we just talked about, he is going to be very unlikely to be able to lower interest rates. Even if he went into the Federal Reserve and was gung-ho on lowering interest rates, he is just one person out of 13 voting members who set interest rates for our economy. And those other 12 members are going to be looking at inflation and how it's getting worse, not better. And it's going to be very hard for the Fed to justify a rate cut. It's going to be harder for the Fed to justify a rate cut now than it even was back in 2022, the last time we had bad inflation. Back in 2022, the Fed was slow to increase interest rates because they thought that the inflation was transitory, that it was just the effects of the pandemic playing themselves out as the economy reopened, and that we were going to get through the bad bout of inflation, things would get back to normal. We all know that didn't happen. We're still dealing with inflation right now that is above the Fed's 2% target, although it is very much lower than it was in 2022. I think inflation hit like 9% at one point, so 3% or 3.5% is not 9%. But it's anytime the Fed makes a mistake, they have a tendency to kind of overcorrect for the mistake that they made. So in 2008, they made the mistake of not keeping interest rates low long enough. 2020, next recession, they kept interest rates low for too long, the exact opposite problem. So they're probably going to swing back on the pendulum and err on the side of keeping interest rates higher for longer because they got so much bad feedback last time they kept interest rates low. The economy did not like it. They're playing this game between, do we care more about inflation or unemployment? And the last time the economy had to choose between one or the other, they chose higher inflation. People did not like that at all. They hated it so much that we saw this play out in election results in 2024, where the incumbent party, the Democrats, lost big. And now we're in kind of a similar scenario, but now the Republicans are in charge. We have inflation, and the Fed is probably going to choose to keep that inflation under wraps as opposed to trying to stimulate the economy and get the job market better. And the job market isn't looking that bad right now. Unemployment and jobs, they look, a bit concerning, but not too concerning. So they're probably going to care more about inflation. And even though there are economists out there who will say that this wartime inflation itself is transitory, the strait will reopen at some point. Surely we won't keep the strait closed forever. That's going to fall on deaf ears because no one's going to buy this transitory argument anymore. It wasn't true the last time. The Fed's not going to be able to say the word transitory without people laughing at them or not believing them. So they're just going to have to keep interest rates high. Maybe even, I'm sure there are going to be people who say that we should hike interest rates in this environment, but that's going to be also hard to justify. So the most likely scenario and what the market is pricing in is no rate cuts for the rest of the year. So high interest rates here to stay. If inflation gets worse, though, we might be hearing more about rate hikes, and that could send mortgage rates much higher than they are now. That's my big concern. The housing market is finally starting to look better with more demand, more buyers out there making sales. Pending sales are up almost 10% from last year. But that could all end very quickly if mortgage rates continue to rise and get higher than they were last year. The good news right now is that they're lower than they were last year, but that could very quickly change. So that's something to pay attention to. All right, another news story to touch on is how are these high oil prices impacting the overall economy? We hear so much about inequality nowadays and how the rich are getting richer while everyone else gets left behind. That's the K-shaped economy. And there seems to be some evidence that these higher oil prices are benefiting the wealthy because the wealthy are the ones that control oil resources. So when that oil becomes more scarce, if you are a billionaire in the United States, you probably have some of your money invested in US oil, and US oil has gotten more valuable because we can't get oil out of the Middle East. So there's an article today in the Wall Street Journal by I hope I'm saying this right, Benoit Morin, and they interviewed Isabella Weber. Is that how I say her name? Hope I'm not butchering her name. Wait, what is her name? Why can I find this? Oh, let's see. Where was the article that I was looking at? Oh, here we go. From Isabella Weber, who is, okay. So Wall Street Journal has an article out today called "The Oil Shock is Causing a $45 billion Rupture in the Economy" by David Uberti. Sorry, I got the author wrong before. And he interviewed Isabella Weber, who is a economist from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, who has in the past advocated for more government intervention in markets. So that's how she leans. And she has done some research about the effect of the war in Ukraine, because back when the war of Ukraine started, also in 2022, oil prices went up. And she found that roughly half of the profits from US energy firms in 2022 flowed to the wealthiest 1% of Americans. So she's basically saying the last time we saw oil prices spike, the rich in America got richer. Everyone else just had to pay higher oil prices, got poorer because of inflation. So she is arguing that this time around, we should expect the same, that these higher oil prices are going to make US billionaires richer while the rest of us pay higher prices at the pump, which I think it's important to point that out, because when we talk about the economy being strong, we always have to think about who is it strong for. It's not strong if you don't have a job and you're looking for a job. It's not strong if you are a recent college graduate. It's not strong if you're a truck driver and your profits are being eaten into by these higher gas prices. So, yes, the economy looks strong right now despite all of the challenges, but the people who are really feeling like they're the winners in this economy are the wealthiest people, and everyone else might not feel that way. So we might see a mismatch between what the economy looks like on the surface and how people are feeling the economy, because there are probably more people feeling bad than there are people feeling good, even though the economy as a whole is doing pretty well. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. This is my first time live streaming. Let me talk to my chat. Don't be a stranger there. All right. What else is going on? What are all the other big news stories of the day? All right. Do I want to talk about? All right, let's talk about some housing news. So there is an article in the Washington Post today about how Idaho now has the smallest lot sizes allowed in the entire country. If you follow housing and you follow zoning, you probably know that it's a big deal that we don't efficiently use our land. That in the places that people most want to live, we have these rules that regulate how much housing you can get in one particular area. We talk a lot about multifamily zoning, allowing for apartment buildings and condos in places that are exclusively zoned for single family homes. But another thing that's super important is that even in single family neighborhoods, you can make the lots of those homes smaller so you can fit more homes in a given area. So a lot of the times in the country, you have minimum lot sizes, and those lot sizes might be like a third of an acre or even half of an acre, and it may have a yard or lot for each individual home. But if you were to reduce those lot sizes, you could fit a lot more homes in. You could have townhomes where the homes are slightly closer together and maybe there's a smaller yard or no front yard at all. And just by virtue of doing that, you can fit in a lot more housing. And this article in the Washington Post by Julie Z. Wheel gets into what's happening in Idaho, where now you can build on lots as small as 1,500 square feet, which is the lowest minimum size in the country. Actually, Idaho. I said Iowa. Excuse me to all the Iowa people. Idaho, two rural states that start with an I. Idaho is not a state that you think of as needing dense housing, but even in Idaho, they recognize that if we build houses close together, we're going to have better urban design, because that means that more people can live near the things that they enjoy, like the grocery store or the school or the library or their jobs. If you minimize the lot sizes, you can fit more homes in a given area. You have fewer homes being built out into farmland, so that keeps the price of farmland from going up. And you can just have a more walkable, bikeable, less car reliant city or neighborhood if you just make the houses closer together. You get more neighbors that way. So good news out of Idaho. That's nice. Another big story in housing news is from the Wall Street Journal, called "Home Builders Are Getting Buried in Claims of Shoddy Construction." And this just is a bummer of a story. So during the pandemic, a lot of people wanted new homes. There was record low mortgage rates, 3%, which made buying a home really cheap. And there weren't enough homes for everybody who wanted to buy these homes. So builders got busy building as many homes as they possibly could to meet this demand that was just so intense. And unfortunately, what it seems like is a lot of those homes that were built during the pandemic were built hastily, built with inferior materials. This was also a time when we had a lot of shortages of materials. And now the big builders are getting sued because of all of the problems in the homes that they built. Now the builders are saying that their homes were fine, that they weren't hastily or shoddily built, and that more people are suing just because there's more awareness of the ability to sue a builder nowadays than there used to be. But the people who are suing are saying, like, no, these homes, they were built with inferior methods, materials, labor, etc. Some pretty cracks in the foundation, cracks in the ceiling, all that kind of stuff. So the builders are getting sued a lot, and I think that's bad news just for the overall housing market, because we want to be able to build homes to meet demand. And the fact that a lot of these newly built homes appear to not have been built to the highest of standards means that they're not really doing their job of adding to the supply. If a home is built and it needs a whole bunch of repairs and it's not livable, like it's so bad it's not livable, and that really isn't the adding to the supply in a positive way. So we'll see how that story unfolds. Okay, I got a comment from Patrick Murray over on YouTube. He says, "Hi, Daryl. I read somewhere that new home builds are now cheaper than existing homes. Is that true or an exaggeration? If it's true, does that imply the direction of where existing home prices go?" I saw that same stat, and I think that it's true on the surface, but there are reasons why it's not exactly true. So first off, a lot of new construction is of smaller homes now than it used to be. Because people have been priced out of buying expensive homes, builders have tried to build cheaper homes. And one way to build cheaper homes is to build them smaller. Another way to build cheaper homes is to build condos as opposed to single family homes. We're still like not building enough condos or apartments, but we're doing better than we used to do. So anyway, the size of these new builds is getting smaller. And that is one reason why they are appearing to be lower price than existing homes, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. In fact, I mean, in general, it's still like more expensive to buy a new construction home if you're talking about the same square footage in the same neighborhood. Then it is still more expensive to buy a new than it is to buy an existing home. So, but it's good that there are smaller home types that these builders are getting into and denser homes that they're getting into, which is bringing down the price point. Hopefully that answers your question. Anthony asks, are home values going to change up or down in the near future? I would bet that home prices continue to go up. They're up 2% from last year. Sorry if my mic falls off. Make sure my mic is on securely. Okay, home prices are up about 2% from last year. I expect that to continue. I think that even with mortgage rates potentially going up, that's probably not going to affect home prices too much, because in this housing market, mortgage rates are affecting both home sellers and home buyers. Mortgage rates impact home buyers because it makes it more expensive for them to borrow money to buy a home, but it's also impacting home sellers because home sellers have 3% mortgage rates from the pandemic. And anytime mortgage rates go up, it means that they are less inclined to give up that 3% rate, because if they were to go buy again, they would have to buy for much more money. So anytime mortgage rates go up, we see both sellers and buyers pull back, which allows prices to kind of just stay stable. In general, prices in real terms, inflation adjusted terms, are coming down. 2% price growth is less than the pace of inflation, which is at about 3.5% right now. So in inflation adjusted real terms, homes are already getting more affordable, but most people don't think about money in that way. We have the money illusion, where when inflation goes up, people just think they're getting richer until they go and pay for something like gas, and then they realize that their money is not going as far. But homeowners in general, they're satisfied with getting at least a slight nominal increase in their home prices. And they don't think of that the same way as when home prices go negative. So basically, whichever direction mortgage rates go, I don't think it's actually going to have that much of an impact on price. I think prices are headed down in real terms very slowly over the next 5-10 years, maybe even longer, which is good news. All right, question from Presley. From your perspective, how are today's real estate dynamics, especially pricing? I'm guessing you meant commodity and not comedy. Pricing, commodity, capital flows, and supply constraints either reinforcing or disrupting the wealth gap. Oh, wait, can I show this? Okay, I don't know if I can show this. Oh, wait, can I show on the stream? I can show on the stream. Okay, you guys can see the comments in the chat now, perhaps. I don't know if this is a cool tool. I'm experimenting with streaming, so I'm not going to show this. I think it's noisy. I'll just read it. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to go back to your question. All right. Presley asked, are these changes reinforcing or disrupting the wealth gap? And what would it take to shift outcomes so that more value is actually created and held locally in communities? Okay, I don't know why that went away, but okay. So basically the question is wealth inequality getting worse because of today's real estate dynamics? I actually think it's getting better. I think things are getting better. We are starting to liberalize zoning laws, as I talked about in Idaho. Mamdani just the other day announced his housing plan to reduce red tape for building in New York. And all around the country, you can find these examples of people taking on YIMBY policies to liberalize zoning and to clear red tape to get more housing built. There's a lot of bipartisan support for that. We have the Road to Housing bill, which actually got rid of some of the more controversial stuff in that bill, removed. Now it's like a more of a clean bill that could get passed soon. So we're seeing just a lot of policy moving in the right direction. There are other things that will make housing more affordable. One is that a lot of housing wealth is held by older Americans. And over the next 10, 20 years, a lot of that wealth is going to dissipate through the economy. Now, a lot of people think that a lot of the homes owned by older Americans are going to be passed down to their heirs. I think a lot of those homes are going to just go into the general market because some bank has a mortgage on them. So, if these older Americans who choose to age in place get reverse mortgages, those homes aren't going to go to their heirs. They're going to go to the bank. The bank's going to sell them. They're going to sell them to the highest possible bidder, which may be developers who want to redevelop older single family homes into denser housing. So Los Angeles is a perfect example of this. You have so many sprawling single family homes in Los Angeles owned by older Americans. And the way that those older Americans stay in their homes for so long is that they finance them, or maybe their mortgage is paid off. But California changed its rules recently so that those homes can't be passed down to heirs that aren't living in the homes and still keep their property tax benefits. So I think a lot of those California homes are going to get sold on the open market, get bought by either younger people, millennials, Gen Zers, the way they are, or get sold to developers who are going to take those single family homes and develop them into multifamily housing, because now you can build up to 3 units on any single family lot in California, even more in areas that are close to transit. So I think in the coming decades, we will see an increase in the housing supply, which will make housing more affordable. And so that's good news in terms of how housing could change inequality into the future. But one thing I worry about in the future is, like, are people going to want to own homes? Are they just going to rent homes? And what does that mean for wealth distribution if people would prefer to rent because they're worried about the economy being just, like, in general more uncertain with climate change, with global instability? So I think for the housing market, there's some good news about housing wealth transferring from older generations to younger generations, but there are other things happening in the world and the economy that could make inequality worse for other reasons. And yes, comedy was an error. Gotcha, Presley. Thanks for the questions. Feel free to drop any more questions in the chat. But I'll just keep going through the interesting news that I see out there for as long as we do this. Okay. Oh, another big story over on Axios is Trump's economic polling is in a free fall. This was written by Josephine Walker. This has been an ongoing story, and I touched on this before. But the fact that gas prices are going up, oil prices are going up, inflation is going up, it had that same thing happened in 2022, and there were severe political consequences for it. And those consequences lasted a long time. They lasted through the 2024 election. So this isn't something that, like, oh, gas prices go up, we can get them back down the week before the election. People will just forget about it. Like, no, they've already been high for so long, and they're probably going to stay high longer. That this is going to have political consequences for the upcoming election. And I think that's something that it's hard to turn that ship around at this point. So the economy always has big political consequences. There's that famous quote, "It's the economy, stupid." If you want to know who has the edge, is the incumbent controlling in charge of an economy that's doing well or not? Because if the incumbent's economy is doing well, they'll probably get reelected. If the incumbent's economy is doing poorly, they will probably face consequences politically and maybe not get reelected. So November is not that far away. It's 6 months. All right. And then, okay, another question from Presley. Oh, and Anthony says, love your book. Thank you. Everybody get my book. Hate the game. I don't know. It's mirrored for me. I don't know if it's mirrored for y'all. Oh, wait. People on Instagram can't see it. Plug my book. Hate the game. Go get it. Available on audiobook. Okay. Question from Presley. Can you speak to market failures such as appraisal gaps, risk, and capital access in LMI communities? What does LMI stand for? Is that low, moderate income? I could look this up. Low and moderate income. Okay, I guessed correctly. Um, that's a big topic. I don't really know where to start. Can you speak to market failures such as appraisal gaps risk? The appraisal gaps thing I think you're talking about is that if you are trying to buy a home in a low or moderate income community, you might not be able to get a loan for the price that you pay for the home if the prices in that area are going up quickly. And this happened even during the pandemic in all types of communities, that there was so much demand for homes that prices were going up so fast that banks were not approving loans because the prices that people wanted to pay were not matching up with the valuations that appraisers were giving the homes. And this could be more of an issue in low and moderate income communities and black and brown communities because the appraisers might have some pre-existing beliefs about what homes are worth in these neighborhoods and might be slower to react to changing prices because of those pre-existing beliefs. So this means that credit access might be harder to come by in low and moderate income areas where prices are going up, and that means that it's harder to buy homes there, and that in and of itself can devalue the homes if the banks aren't approving the valuations that people want to pay. So yes, that is an issue. How do you fix it? I think that appraisers could use AI. I was actually going to get into the other news of the day, which is the AI backlash. I think that I get why people hate AI. I understand all the reasons that, you could say it's bad for the environment. You could say that these tech AI overlords just want to get rid of workers and that's inherently inhumane. Um, but there's also positives, like all technology, there's positives and negatives. And I think one place that AI could be playing a role is doing better evaluations. Now, of course, AI is trained on data that itself could be problematic, that itself could have bias in it. But I think that there needs to be more accountability in the appraisal space, and AI could play a role there with a properly trained AI model that is instructed to account for pre-existing discriminatory behavior. But in general, I think that the appraisal industry needs a technological update to the way that they do things because we have better data nowadays. We have all types of data on Redfin. We have geospatial data. We have satellite data. We should be getting better at appraising homes, but I think that that industry is a bit outdated, and hopefully that's something that can help with mortgage accesses, just updating the way that appraisals are done. Um, okay, that's what I have to say about that. I'm going to think more about that question though, since you brought it up. Let me switch over to Instagram. Do I have any questions on Instagram? I just have. Oh, wait, I have a question from ZTX. I live in Austin and rents are down with high vacancy. Is this a trend everywhere? This is not the trend everywhere. Austin is actually pretty unique. Austin built Austin was a hot migration destination during the pandemic. Everybody was moving in, and Austin did a great job of clearing the way to build lots more housing for all the people who wanted to live in Austin. And it's almost a victim of its own success because so many people wanted to move in. Prices went super high in 2022 because of all the demand. Austin was a place where you would see like 20 people bidding on a home and homes selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking, to the point that appraisers were not appraising them and you couldn't even get loans. The only way you could win a home was to pay all cash for the price that you wanted. And now prices have come back down because builders built a lot of homes with more supply. Prices come down because as a home seller, you're having to compete against other homes for sale, and you have to lower your price in order to get your home sold. And that's a good thing for housing affordability. Like, a lot of people say, oh, the Austin housing market is cratering. Prices are still above what they were pre-pandemic. If you just take out the pandemic, it's pretty much a straight line of home prices going up in Austin. So it's really only the people that bought at the very top in 2022 who might have bought for more than what they could sell their home for. But and people try to nail me on this, oh, you didn't say Austin was a bubble. At the time, I was saying you should proceed with caution in Austin. You should be like taking a step back if you're getting into a bidding war with 20 other people and you're wondering whether you should increase your budget by $100,000. Like that's all bubbly behavior. So I mean, I got to go back and check my tweets or whatever, but back in 2022, I was not saying like everybody should go buy a house in Austin. Prices are always going to go up. No, we were building more supply. It should have been expected that prices were going to come back down. And they haven't come down even that much. They're just lower than what they were at the peak. But that's what you want in a healthy housing market. You want builders to build when there's more demand, so the people who want to move into an area have the opportunity to do so without pricing out someone else. And I think Austin did a good job of that. And I don't know what else people would have wanted. We don't want prices to always go up forever in every single scenario. That's how we get national housing bubbles. So the fact that Austin got a little bubble, what am I talking about? Bubble burst? It didn't burst. I would say that it deflated. That's a good thing. This is how we want the housing market to work. All right. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think I got through all of the news that I wanted to talk about today. I said I was going to talk about AI hate, but I think I already kind of touched on that a bit. So yeah, unless anybody else has any questions, can I check on Substack? Oh wait, I see questions on Substack. Sorry, Substack, I did not mean to neglect you. Let me go check on your questions. Okay, Ben asks, how do changing interest and changing oil prices affect car demand, which is a large share of household consumption, and domestic vehicles are mostly gas dependent and fuel intensive. Rising oil prices should theoretically reduce demand for gas. Gas is a good that economists call inelastic. And what that means is that in general, people will buy the same amount of gas every single week because they need to go to their jobs. That takes a certain amount of gas. They need to go grocery shopping. That takes a certain amount of gas. So when gas prices go up and down, people don't typically adjust their behavior all that much, which is why like prices can go quite high before people start backing off. Because if prices go up like 1% and everybody doesn't react, go up 2%, 5%, 10%, nobody reacts, that means prices are going to have to keep going up because there's all this excess demand. And the only way you can get more supply is for the price to go up so that the suppliers refine more oil, start drilling more oil, whatever it is, to increase the supply to match the prices. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that like in general, when gas prices go up, people don't really change their driving behavior. But if it goes on long enough, then people will start to adjust their behavior. If gas prices remain high, people will be less inclined to get that second car. They'll be, and also oil is an input to the production of cars. You need oil in order to make cars. So gas prices going up already is going to make new cars more expensive. But then on top of that, people are going to be less inclined to buy those cars because they know they can't afford the gas for it. Or they're going to be more inclined to buy a Prius as opposed to a Ford F-150 because the Prius needs less gas. People might also decide to bike more, might decide to use public transit more. And with that, we could see people change their preferences for where they want to live. They might want to live in denser areas that are walkable with public transit because gas prices are higher. So if this goes on long enough, we might not just see people desiring fewer cars, but desiring to live in places where cars are less necessary. And, you know, I guess that's a silver lining because I'm pro I want to say I'm anti-car. I'm pro walking, pro public transit. So if more people try that out, we got the new subway line in LA. I'm from LA originally, and that's just, I don't know. My life would have been so different if in high school I could have taken the subway from Santa Monica to Koreatown instead of taking the bus. I could have gotten there so much faster. My best friend in high school, I lived in Santa Monica. She lived in Koreatown. So I was riding the bus up and down Wilshire like once a week to go visit her. She was riding it to me. We could have had so much more fun if the subway was up and running then, but alas. But good for the future generations. Good for everybody in LA now who gets to ride the subway. Hopefully they take it. I know this public transit has a bad rep in LA. But yeah, gas prices going up. Maybe more people are going to ride the LA subway. They're going to realize getting around by subway is way better than sitting in traffic. And that could be a good thing. What else is on Substack? Ben said he had a house slide down a hill in our neighborhood built in COVID. Yeah, those buildings, more evidence that the builders were not building up to standard back then. Okay, I think that's all the questions I see on Substack. I don't see any more on Instagram. I don't see any more on LinkedIn or YouTube or X. I'm on X. I'm on all the channels right now. But anyway, thank you for tuning in to my live stream. I'm going to try to do these more regularly and set a cadence for them so that you know when they're coming. But this was an experiment, and I would say that this was a successful experiment. So thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time.